As it relates to AI, the control is not about us at all. It's within a system, which is not controlled by me as a creator, and it's not controlled by anyone who's experiencing it. It's controlled by whoever owns the system. And kind of to the point that everyone's been making, that system is not a black box. I mean, it is for us, but behind that is a whole other group of engineers. It's a big tech corporation. It's not a control shift between the creator and those who perceive it. The ultimate control when it comes to AI system is within the system itself.
So, again, thank you all for being here. I want to start the conversation by inviting you all to talk about what first drew you to immersive storytelling, and how did it all begin for you? And I'm really opening up for whoever wants to start first. Go, yeah.
Okay, I'll start. Firstly, thank you for having us, and thank you to the Sloan Foundation and Film Independent for having me here. I think for me it started with, I think about dreams a lot, and the connection between dreams and cinema, because there is like you can jump time, jump space, and there's no logic really there. So I feel like that gave way to some form of meditation that I would do, and then cinema happened for me. And then it only makes sense logically in that order to go towards VR. I feel like it's a very innate human need for us to want to explore more than what we see. You know, when you're kids, you rub your eyes, and when you rub your eyes, you can see some particles, like something like an amoeba floating around, and you play with that a lot. I think that is the primordial sort of need. So yeah, that has been the real reason for immersive storytelling.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
I'll jump in. I've always been drawn to basically two mediums. Like, this goes back 30 years, drawing and video, and I took a very long break. And when I returned to my practice in my mid-30s, I started making really sort of visceral, biomorphic, abstract drawings. And what was really interesting to me was the ways in which people who experienced them reported feeling the drawings in their bodies. And that was an intoxicating idea to me. And I thought, well, how could I amplify that feeling? How could I take that and turn it up to 11? And I remember I struggled in many different ways. I tried to make them 3D. I was thinking about sort of the haptic experience of a 2D drawing. And a curator actually, when I was gnashing my teeth, said to me, well, why don't you just make these drawings in VR? And it was an absolute light bulb moment, because I hadn't thought about VR since I was an undergraduate, when I first learned about VR more in the context of political theory. And so, and this is a controversial thing to say now, of course, but at the time they were considered, maybe this is an opportunity to make like an empathy machine. But which of course has been debunked since then, and complicated, but I first started drawing in VR, and it was an ecstatic, following this conversation, and it was an ecstatic embodied experience. And that that was sort of the spark, the sort of heart-pounding moment that led to everything that's followed. So I really would say that my origin was when that happened.
Anisia?
Yeah, two things, I think. First, the desire to represent unrepresented people. I come from a background of acting. I went to school in performance school, and it appeared very quickly that there was not a lot for in storytelling and in narration for people like me, or for people that look like me, and then along the line for the Global South, and then, all of those things. So I think I was frustrated, and so I started to look for ways to create a space for that type of stories and people, etc. And so the first film I made, it's very funny to me because it came about because I was like invited to tour the United States with a band of with musicians, and I had an idea for a film, and I was like, oh my God, I need to get that film made, like, now. And so I went to see producers and people trying to get a camera, trying to get stuff to be able to actually just witness something that I thought would be very interesting. And nobody gave me anything. And when I found myself like, well, how can I do this? There was something in my pocket, and it was an iPhone. And we are talking about the iPhone 4. Before those machines turned into high surveillance devices. We're talking about really the beginning of that thing that was, at your proximity and had a camera, and you could move with it, and you could end. So I did Dream States, which is a feature film entirely shot on iPhones, through 35 states of America at the moment where the Black Lives Matter movement was, really at the birth of that. So I really pushed that machine to its, I had the impression that I was pushing that machine to its, narration and artistic potential in ways. It's one of the first movie that was like that, filmed on those devices. And so that's the beginning of my story with technology, with images, because I wasn't making images at that point, and with all that opening into our relationship to that world, to that virtual world. What we do with it? Are we turning it on ourselves, or can we just also turn it in the other way and be a witness to this world with this? And from that, of course, what makes those machines? And so that's how we arrived at the latest film that we did with Saul Williams, which is Neptune Frost, which is exploring the analog ways in which those material are resourced, those things that are in those machines. Okay, so and what is the gap between the exploitation that is needed for you to be able to have those little cameras, those little surveillance machine in your everyday life, and yeah. So that's the origin, and yeah.
Incredible. Jessica.
Everyone's story is so lovely.
I know.
Mine's gonna be so boring.
No.
I didn't want to work in VR at all. Like, that was not even on the docket. I was making films at Google. It was getting kind of boring, and kind of like, kind of like the daily grind started becoming. I mean, it's not a bad job to have as a daily grind, but it was a grind. And then I got reached out to by a group of engineers at Google who were working on a prototype 360 VR rig. And then the rest is kind of history. I kind of tried to ignore them. They kept bothering me. And so I eventually went to them, and then they showed me a couple of different things that they had done. I don't know, how many of you have actually worked in VR before or have experienced VR? So if I say Stitch, you kind of get it, right? Like the whole 360 thing. So they showed me a couple of stitches. And one of them was like, I think it was like outside the University of Washington. And they were like, you know, it was kind of benign and it wasn't really interesting. And I was like, okay, I get it. They're like, did you see the girl in the red dress? I'm like, no. And I'm like, they're like, damn it. And like, they're trying to like direct me to do it. I mean, I have this headset on. I'm like sweating. I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And then they showed me a couple other ones. One was like this thing at KCRW, or no, that's here. What's the one in Seattle? KXP. Is that right? Okay, thanks. And it was like this band was all around me performing, and I felt like awful. I was just like, please get away from me. I can't move. I can't leave these people, and they're just performing at me. And that was pretty annoying. And I was like, well, this isn't really, like, can you hear the audio shift? I'm like, no, I can't. And then there was this last one that they had, and they were like, should we show her the other one? And they're like, no, it's just a bunch of us hanging out. And I'm like, no, show me that. And it was this, and I can't even describe how emotional this thing was, and it was literally just a bunch of engineers hanging out. It was literally just engineers who had turned on the rig for the first time, and they were just so happy that it worked. So they were waving at it, they were throwing shit at it, they were like skipping around it, they were like laughing and having the best time. And I'm like, I don't know what this is. But this is like, you know, I'd spent so many, you know, I grew up, my dad was an engineer, like I grew up loving technology and wanting to humanize it in a big way. When I was at film school at NYU, like decades ago, like even like I loved, I mean, I'm not just waxing poetic here, but like I loved the Sloan grants. I like tried to get the Sloan grants because I'm like, I'm a tech nerd, like I want to make films about technology, let's do this. And so I was like really fascinated by it, but it's always so hard to humanize engineering and technology, as I'm sure a lot of you have tried or are doing it now. It's a lot. It's really hard to like kind of walk the fine line between both things. And then here was this thing that a bunch of engineers just filmed randomly, and it was like closer to the truth of that than anything I could have ever seen or made myself, like in any sort of traditional medium. So I'm watching this, I'm getting emotional, they don't know why. They're like, is she okay? Like, what's going on? So as soon as I took off, I remember this clear, like one of the engineers who had made it looked at me being like, are you all right? I'm like, I think so. So I'm like, well, I want to help you, but what do you want me to do? And he goes, like, what do I do with this thing? He's like, well, we were really hoping that you would tell us. And that's kind of how the whole thing started. And it has been a bit like falling forward awkwardly ever since. Yeah.
Incredibly. Also, thank you to the Google engineers who did bother you, continue to bother you, did not give up for the sake of all of us here. That's incredible. I feel like learning from all of your entry points, like it sparks possibilities for all of us who are hoping to like be able to like use these tools and technologies. There were a lot of, in your origin stories, there was a lot of conversations about the human connection. So I'm wondering if we can talk about how and if working in these new mediums and with these new technologies have shifted the way that you all think about audiences or engage with audiences, like the ways that they engage with your work and the way that you like go into the making process thinking differently because of the tools that you're making and thinking about them differently. Long question, so please give everyone time to kind of sorry. And again, it's open for whoever wants to jump in.
I just talked, so I'm taking a break.
I guess one thing I would say is that I've always taken actually a pretty critical approach to technology, to the power systems that fund it, that support it. I think a lot about who it helps and who it harms. And so I try every time I use it, I engage with it, to do so really, really intentionally. And to try and locate in, you know, whether it's in expanded cinema, and I'm assuming everybody knows that term. I hope everybody's read the book by Gene Youngblood. Whether it's there, whether it's through participatory AR, anything kind of, any of the immersive projects that I've done. Really, I'm not really working that much in VR other than modeling right now, but you know, how can we identify those points of human connection? In my case, through invitation. So the way that I try and use this work, again, always aware that that it necessitates the prosthetic of the Black Mirror to access a lot of these things, whether certainly in the case of AR. But if we are going to use these tools that whose very existence relies on the forced labor disproportionately absorbed by the global South, how do we use them in a way that is responsible, compelling, and engenders and ensures some kind of human connection? So certainly with my app, in 2018, I founded the Fourth Wall app. Originally I was really frustrated with gatekeeping. I was frustrated with, I had done a lot of work with communities and populations that were excluded from a lot of conversations, and I thought, I want to challenge what public art is, who gets to decide what it is, where it appears. And by translating my VR drawings, this was the very, very early stages. Now the app has really changed and expanded, but the first sort of iteration was I took my VR drawings, translated them into augmented reality, and offered them to an unseen, unknown audience, and invited them to create context and content for the work. And what I found immediately was that when you invite that type of collaboration, the human imagination is extraordinary, and people will respond generally, not always, but generally in ways that you couldn't possibly imagine. And the kind of unbridled nature of that creativity blew my mind then, and it continues to blow my mind now, and fuels all of the really more advanced and boundary-pushing AR that we've done that is co-built and participatory. So I would just say that, and then I'm going to stop talking 1 second. The one last thing I would add is that the ability of certain technologies, I just made an expanded film for a dome called COSM, which is here in Inglewood, and it's sort of like the Sphere but smaller. It's the best way I can put it. And we won't get into the weeds about the technology. However, the ways in which that technology allows viewers to access their own sensorium, my hope is that there's transformative potential in that. And those are the kinds of stories that I'm interested in telling, where you can offer some kind of invitation to engage attention in a way that isn't blind, uncritical, and participatory.
So it's like a double-edged sword, I feel, engaging with, especially working on this film, Humans in the Loop. I ended up understanding AI a lot more than I did. We started about 2.5, 3 years back, and things were still kind of just developing at that time, So there were a lot of issues, there were a lot of bias-related issues, especially with respect to what is the training data, how much of diversity is there in training data, etc. All of that we tried to put in this film, That said, when I was working on this film, there are many tools that I tried to use myself. For example, we have a porcupine in the film. I'll just give a one-liner for people to have context. It's a story of an indigenous woman who begins interacting with AI in a very remote part of India as part of a data labeling center. It's something that's happening in many parts of India. So we have a porcupine, for example, in the film, and the porcupine represents something very deeply indigenous. And we did try to generate because you can't really get a porcupine physically to shoot it, because it's essentially like such an exotic sort of an animal, right? So we did try to generate it. We failed. There is no way that you can generate a porcupine right now.
Not yet.
Not yet. So what we ended up finding, that's another story, but we ended up finding an actual porcupine which is okay with human presence, and we captured it on camera. But that said, when I was editing it, I had limited footage. I had to shoot it like a documentary and then apply the cut to fictionalize it, right? So when you do that, there are so many tools in a lot of editing softwares and a lot of which are generated, that can really, really help tweaking. In Hindi, they say that, footage ko todna, in the sense that you have a footage which you think that classically will align a certain way, but you if you can use certain tools to break your footage. For example, you can dim an entire an exposed porcupine and make it look like night. You can flip the image. You can, for example, there's one final scene in the film where this character is interacting with the porcupine, but we used 2 separate cameras and we merged that. You know, absolutely separate cameras, separate lenses, but they're in the same frame, and it was absolutely essential. That happened because of Adobe's Premiere Pro's tendency to, you know, mask things well and picking on the masking sides well. So there is a certain kind of I feel with technology, I feel there is a lot of exploration that one can do. But that said, I'm very cautious about one thing myself. Like, you know, when Ari is brought to India, it can't expose a certain skin color. It still can't. It can expose perhaps till a certain point, but there is so we work around it. We work around the exposure. We work around this, that. So that primarily because it is attuned to be to expose a fairer person. You know, so those are the kind. From that time itself, from the time of cameras being invented, etc., that same biased sort of an approach has been towards technology. So one has to just be careful and, you know, navigate around that. And I think that's been the journey of this film also a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny, that story, because I remember when TikTok and them were doing those filters, you know, those filters where you have stuff. Yeah, it was blind to black skin. So people, you know, about a certain tone of skin color, you couldn't participate in the thing. So yeah, it is a long history, the story of what's visible and invisible in technology. But I think for me, it's I am at a point where VR and all those technology for me that were proposed as the future of something are changing space. They don't represent for me the absolute future of cinema or of storytelling or of for the simple reason that we are living in a time where those all those tools have been, I think, invested by police, states, politics, and have been clearly showing, to me at least, that there is nothing magic about it, that it's all made, man-made, that even the people that from which we harvest the data, or who is harvesting our data, or how those machines are conceived or thought of. I'm glad they ask you to come and tell them what to do with it. I know that the 360, yeah. But it's rare to be asked as an artist to participate in those conception, for the simple reason that they are now I think more working towards exploitation and money making, and it's a big business now. And I was thinking earlier this morning, like it's a little bit like the hackers, that community that was there and that was like very anarchist and very against the power, and that was those new heroes, like in the political sphere of things, and And today, I have the impression that they are all like working for conservative, you know, yes, you know, that they all, give in with you know, being advisors on some security, you know, boards and things like that. And all of those things and those platforms that were exciting to me at first, as a platform of for liberation, for inclusiveness, for community, for you know, openness to things that were not accessible or that were like gated due to the cost of cinema, you know, all of those things. To me today, they are exactly reproducing the same exact, you know, framework. So I'm not like I'm trying to see what is the next thing, what is really the next thing, because I don't really see that. Yes, it's true, it's very cool. You can, you know, for instance, use those programs to, you know, go faster, have your color palette entered into your camera way faster than if you go through the thing of programming your thing. Yes, you can generate, even though in FX, you know, it's still super slow. It's really, really slow. Like, you're gonna rotate, you know, it's very, very slow. So, I mean, maybe you gain time, but it's always a human and somebody behind all those things. I'm very clear on that. There is no magic. It depends on the aesthetic, the datas, the everything that is us, and we are very responsible in those things. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. As someone who was traditionally taught to be a filmmaker, you are used to having all the control of the story. That is, the story is that level of control. All of this is about control. The AI, I mean, I would not even put immersive entertainment and AI in the same group, because the kind of the crux of control is very different between the two things, right? So when you think about immersive, say, like, I don't like calling it immersive film either, because film just negates everything that I just said. But the thing about immersive is that it's not a storytelling medium in the sense that we are taught what a storytelling medium is. It's not a direct interpretation of experience as a thing, as a nugget of something for someone to like look at and go, oh, okay, I get it. It's not a direct line of communication. Immersive entertainment in any capacity, immersive media, is allowing the person who's in the experience to essentially be the camera themselves, to explore the space, to come up with the story with which to, you know, use as the thing that they tell about the experience later on. So the story emerges, but later. So it's, I've left the experience and now I've had the experience myself, now I can tell the story the way that I experienced it, right? And it all goes back to human experience, which is a remarkable mess and insane. You know, like, it's just, it's messy. And so when you control mess, you can't, first of all, you can't. Like, the kind of mess that we are, is it's hard to control. When we try to do it, something else pops up, right? Like, okay, we can control the color for a piece of our film. That same technology is what's like not allowing us to do X, Y, and Z on the other end. It has cultural ramifications and so on. So it's like, we're just all over the place. But anyway, so the control level there is different. As someone who's creating a piece of immersive, I cannot guarantee that anyone will have the experience that I expect them to have. I cannot expect anyone to have the story that I have in my head. And so a lot of that comes down to, like, you know, me being, you know, A, having an existential crisis, and B, thinking like, all right, I have to go inside myself and be okay with this having to be reworked, and me being okay that it's not my story to tell, which for a lot of us who are storytellers, that's really tricky. And it's kind of hard. It's a hard thing to let go of, but you have to let go. And so there's that kind of gradient, like, you know, with AR work, you know, sometimes you can have, you know, there's more conversation. Like, the world has more control now. And so it's not just the thing that I'm even giving you in terms of an artistic representation of any kind of experience. Now the world has its own agenda, and it doesn't care about us at all. And we've done a really shitty job caring about it. So it's like, who cares? You know, the relationship's really just not great. But it's able to do what it needs to do. It does what it does, and we don't really have a lot of control of that either. So you have another level of control that's all, you know, kind of jumbled and all over the place. When AI gets involved, and I have a lot of opinions on AI, but as it relates to AI, the control is not about us at all. It's within a system, which is not controlled by me as a creator, and it's not controlled by anyone who's experiencing it. It's controlled by whoever owns the system. And kind of to the point that everyone's been making, that system is not a black box. I mean, it is for us, but behind that is a whole other group of engineers. It's a big tech corporation. It might be, you know, I know plenty of people, you know, plenty of smaller startups that are trying to create data sets themselves that are more ethical, that are, it's data that people have signed off and said, yes, use it for training. So regardless, it's like, it's not, you know, it's not a control shift between the creator and those who perceive it. The ultimate control when it comes to an AI system is within the system itself. All to say, it's all about control. It's all about an ecosystem of control, of letting go of that control, of regaining it, of having it being managed by someone else entirely, something else entirely. The future is in that orchestration of control as it exists between mediums, right? Film doesn't go away because of it. It's just a different kind of control. Immersive doesn't go away or supersede anything else. It's just a different variation of control. The AI part is the part that's a little trickier because we don't have a whole lot to say in that, at least right now. So,
kind of going back on that, I'm gonna put you on the spot again.
Great.
Like, you just talked, like, it's a beautiful way of thinking. Like, I mean, it's a much more clear way for me to think about, like, working in AR. But what does that do with your collaborations with other people? Like, you came from a traditional filmmaking background, you know, film is about working with other people to make the films that you make. Like, how has that shifted for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wasn't just a filmmaker. Like, I could have been a computer scientist just as easily. I would have been a really crappy computer scientist, but I could have tried. I was more interested in, like, kind of the cultural ramifications of tech. Like, I was going to NYU Film School, and then I was running across the street to Quran Institute of Mathematical Sciences and doing computer science classes against my advisors at NYU saying, like, you have no time to do that. I'm like, watch me. It was a terrible idea, but I did it. And they were right. But I had actually taught myself Final Cut before I got to NYU. Like, I learned to be an editor, and I loved it because it still kept me with computers, and I could still learn how to use it. I was putting, like, weird film grain to make my digital stuff look like film. It was terrible. It didn't work, but I tried, you know? Like,
I love it.
So it was like I was very involved with computers even through the filmmaking process, and my career was this kind of slapstick back and forth between, like, I'm working at Apple. It's like, okay, and then I'm like, well, that isn't great. And then I would work at a production company. I'm like, well, that's not it either. And I would keep doing this thing, and then Google actually kind of made sense for a little while at least. But for me, it's like I've always been really interested in systems and designing systems and thinking about, like, the foundational models and frameworks that make those systems work. When I was able to actually create my own platforms, like, I worked with Bose on this immersive audio platform called Traverse back in 2017, 2018. And when I was making a platform myself, I suddenly became the person that was, like, creating these things that other people were going to be able to use and build off of them. Was not wildly successful because then Web3 hit the market and, like, no one wanted to invest in an immersive audio platform anymore. But what was interesting about that, though, is, like, it was kind of the new hackers were the ones that were building their own data sets, like now at least, or the people that were building their own platforms were saying, like, I don't need to use the thing that I'm being given by any of the major tech corporations. I could decide to build my own thing. So I have a lot of I have a lot of respect for engineers and a lot of respect for the people who make it. I don't think they're absolved because they're brilliant of all the cultural ramifications or, you know, the effects that they have on society as a result of the tools they make. I think you need to take responsibility for both sides of the coin. So wait, what was your question originally? You're saying, like, has that shifted how I think of?
Yeah, like your collaborations.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. It's, you know, there's not really a fine line anymore between a filmmaker and an engineer. I think it's, what's great. It's great for me because I'm like, finally, everyone now understands that like, this is okay. Yeah. I feel like current people are now starting to go to NYU for film. Like they're like, we all want to do, like Nancy's going to be teaching a drawing class at NYU's engineering. I'm sorry, did I burst the bubble on what
totally.
you're doing? Okay.
No,
Congrats, Nancy.
Yeah.
Congrats.
But like that's the kind of interdisciplinary, like we need that. And it's like I was looking through the Sloan booklet and I was like, look at all the films and grants that are going to people who want to tell these stories about tech, both documentary and like this is like it's an incredible time to be a filmmaker or an engineer. Because like one, also like there's been no innovation in personal computing for the past 60 years, not really. Like when it comes to interfaces and how we actually interact with these technologies, it has not changed since the late 60s. So it's ripe for change now. Everyone is just incredibly tired of the way things are going when it comes to tech and the way that we compute. There's a lot of talk about spatial computing, but the big companies have not figured it out, which means that it's ripe for everyone else to figure it out. So it's like, it's a really, like we all have been feeling like in the tech space at least that something's brewing, something's happening, but it has to involve, and it's gonna sound like me on a podium, everyone has to work on this together, but it really is like an interdisciplinary challenge that I think we're at a better place to actually do something about it now than we ever have been before.
Can I add to that? I just want to say, I want to just build on that because everything everyone is saying is so compelling and I think so urgently relevant right now and in this moment of like techno-feudalism. And I think that because these tools, particularly, machine learning, broadly speaking, has been used extractively, is being used to dehumanize versus humanize us. There is a huge opportunity as makers, as creators, as filmmakers, and anybody in the creative space to insist upon not just a critical lens turned back on it, but also to insist upon an understanding of what does make us human. And also the more than human, okay? I don't want to leave out the rest of our interdependent, the species on which we depend and depend on us. But I do think that is the opportunity, is to find those, because as we become more and more dislocated and separate from each other, while these oligarchs and corporations are profiting obscenely from our lack of consent, and from all of our data, that at least to me, and I don't want to preach here, but I just want to say that I think there's a great opportunity to invert, to subvert, and to use these tools against and use them in wily and in ways that perhaps are unexpected and might be, and part of that opportunity might be in that, I don't want to call it latent space, but that kind of messy space that you're talking about that feels like there's a lot of opportunity there. But it gets really complicated when you add the surveillance industrial complex, which is trained on all of us all the time.
Yeah. I think we should stay there for a bit. Like, think about, because one way or another, even if we are not planning on making work using these tools, we are interacting with them and we are using them. So you're part of it. We are part of them, whether or not we use it. And then we are responsible for the way that it's extracted, the way that it is disposed, as we see in Neptune Frost, and the way that it's trained, as we see in your film, Aranya. And I think that, what do you, you all have talked about it a little bit, but I think, really digging into, what is our responsibility? Because I think just sitting and letting it happen, we're not gonna, shift it.
Can I I'm sorry, I don't mean to monopolize this. I was just gonna say one thing really quickly. One project that I'm hoping that was unexpectedly prescient, I didn't know that this was going to be relevant at the time, but I have a project that just launched at LACMA, which is an interactive AR project, and it's focused on biomimicry and mycelial networks and mother trees and civic hubs, and it imagines 3 mother trees, one as a public library, one as a community college, one as a museum, and it invites the audience to contribute cultural nutrients, aka spores, an idea, a song, a poem, a film, a teacher, anything that might come from one of these three civic institutions that you feel, you the viewer, warrants cultural preservation and archiving and naming. And I had no idea when I built this and was going to launch it that we would have books that were banned, that entire histories would be erased from the National Archive and elsewhere, that entire departments would be eliminated for the most specious reasons. And so it feels like, and watching people contribute contribute their thoughts and tell their stories and why these things impacted them is one of the more moving projects I've ever embarked upon. And it is amazing to scroll through these nodes as you tap on all the nodes in the network and see what has impacted people and what matters. And because we are a platform that answers to no one, that is not dependent on any external anything, oversight, I intend to keep that as an archive. And as it travels, I want to know what is important to people. What do we need to protect? Who do we need to protect? And I think that's one opportunity to use these tools. I mean, I'm not saying it's not flawless. There are a lot of complications and things that, nothing is, it's always messy. But it is one way that I feel we can work against these the autocracy and the fascism.
I'm going to take a little bit off of what you said about mycelium, for example, right? A lot of indigenous communities, and I've seen this throughout the world, they speak about interconnectedness and they explain it in their own way. They speak about how trees exchange nutrients via the mycelium. And this film essentially comes from a lot of conversations that I had with the indigenous women specifically, because they are the drivers of that society in most parts of India. I think if you look, for example, if I were to talk about AI specifically or other parts of technology, but AI specifically, can AI ever represent the reality of an indigenous woman? She's working to enable it in this film, but can she find her own identity in it? Can she? It's not just identity. It's centuries of knowledge systems,
And colonialism.
And colonialism, absolutely. So, for example, when I was traveling in Jharkhand, which is the state where the indigenous communities live, you can still see older colonial arches. You can see physical remnants. Like other parts of India have kind of moved on. We have really ugly buildings now, but at least these areas they have tracts of jungle, and then there are these colonial structures. When I was traveling there, I realized that what happened almost 300 years ago, where colonizers had come and they settled in these parts and they said that your knowledge systems are primitive and that you're savages, can happen again on an AI primarily trained on first world data, global north data. And it's like the place kind of revealed the theme to me. So in that sense, I feel, but the question is that where is the onus, really? Do we only say that the onus is with the big tech, which it is, because they have the power, essentially. But there are for example, a lot of political movements in the world which have come from bottom up, and there are political movements which have come from top down. And the ones which have come from bottom up has been about people coming together and being aware about what these things do to them and how they can impact. So I think there is, especially with these women, there is a gradual, like I kind of noticed that there is an agency that they're beginning to assert, especially in an interpretation of, for example, there's a scene in the film where she's told to talk about a pest. Okay, there's a worm that she has to label as a pest. Now, pest is a value term, right? Is a value term, and when she has to do that, this is a worm which she's grown up seeing protect a plant instead of killing it. So she refuses to say that, she refuses to mark it as a pest. Her manager tells her, if the clients say it is a pest, it is a pest. Label it like that. So, but in that moment, she has agency. So I feel like it requires like a both top down and a resistive bottom up for it to really change.
That's beautifully said.
Thank you.
We are sadly running out of time, but I do want to leave it in a few sentences, Anisia and Jessica, closing moments for us, please.
No, I was thinking when you were all, you know, I think the center of it all is narratives. I am interested in telling stories about tech, because I'm interested in telling stories about power and disempowered people. So at the end of the day, I think technology is very ancient. I think art has always been connected to tech, be it in music, in anything. Actually, you can find tech. And one of the things that we were exploring on in Neptune Frost was our own engineering, our internal engineering that intersects with so many things. Us as technology, a community as technology. So in a way, it's I guess tech versus organic life. You know, there is something in that relationship that I think is essential, and it's essential to understand that in that intersection, we are the greatest technology.
I mean, that was good.
I know.
So
it's like everyone.
I feel like I feel like everyone's like, this is the poetic version. I'm like, I worked at a tech company. It's okay. I mean, the one thing I would say is, and the one thing I would push on is, there's kind of a weird, maybe not, and maybe I'm just out of it, but it's like I feel like no one makes good sci-fi anymore. Like I feel like there is a lack of speculative fiction that needs to exist, that supersedes the old sci-fi stuff that people continuously, and by people we know, you know who I'm talking about, continually try to live up to. Like, what is the next, like we always get asked is like, what's the next 5 years, 10 years? It's like, you guys you need to tell us. Like that genre needs a lot more support, a lot more, and we need a lot of perspectives on it. But that kind of speculative fiction, sci-fi, is this like the stuff of the past is the stuff that is creating what we're experiencing now. And so if you want to build a future that feel like if you really want to inspire whatever's coming next, that's the place to really start building.
Well, you all have a job to do now, as you heard it today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Incredible.
Thank you.
And thank you all for being here. Thank you to Film Independent, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, and the programming team, Advik Benny, and all the other programmers. Incredible, brilliant. Thank you.